Hello, my name is Justin Jacobs. I'm a farmer in northwestern North Dakota. We started farming in 2016 and have grown a variety of crops, but one of our key characteristics on our farm that sets us apart is that we practice intercropping. This video will highlight what intercropping is, some of the origin behind intercropping, as well as some of our personal experiences. Make sure to check out our YouTube page to see the full story behind our intercropping as well as some of our other farm practices. Thank you for listening.
Because intercropping can be defined as the growing of two or more species of crop within one field.
Intercropping is not a new concept. Instead, it is one that has been around for some time. Some of its history can be traced back to Roman cultures as well as Egyptian cultures. However, one of the most recent examples of intercropping in our modern culture can be traced back to the Native Americans and the practice known as the Three Sisters. So what are the Three Sisters? Well, the Three Sisters was a gardening or agricultural practice of planting green beans, squash, and maize or corn together. The purpose behind this was to utilize different benefits from each of the crops and grow them together in a way that maximized their total usage. The green beans were grown to supply some nitrogen back into the ground and supply nitrogen for the corn. The corn was grown as the staple food, but it also provided a natural trellis system for the green beans to grow up and not and be able to be harvested above the soil surface rather than at ground level. And the squash was planted in order to provide a natural barrier from pests such as raccoons or rabbits. This was just a way to utilize the kind of natural spikiness or spininess of a squash or pumpkin or gourd type plant in order to protect the beans and the corn. So a mound would be created, the corn in the middle, beans around the outside of the corn, and then the squash on the outside of the mound.
Intercropping is gaining a kind of a resurgence of popularity within North America, the United States, modern agricultural practices. Production practices such as relay cropping, which would be planting something either in the early spring or in the fall, and then following it up with planting something else directly into that, and then having two harvest passes. So a common example would be planting rye in the fall, and then in the spring planting soybeans directly into it, taking the rye off first, and then the soybeans will grow up, mature, and then you take the soybeans off later. 2 planting passes, 2 harvest passes. That's relay intercropping. Another example of intercropping could be just simply growing clover or some sort of nurse or companion crop that is not harvested for its grain value, but is used to add a benefit to the crop that you are trying to achieve for a cash crop. So an example there would be growing clover and wheat, growing faba beans with corn. Mixed grain intercropping is the practice of growing 2 crops that are planted at the same time and then harvesting both crops at the same exact time, and then using a post-harvest method of separation. So when it comes to intercropping, you need a couple of key characteristics. First, you need two plants, two different crops that have a similar maturity to one another. The maturity needs to be similar so that they can be planted at the same time, but then also harvested at the same time, and so that you don't have any potential production losses through early shattering or immature plants. The other important factor in a mixed grain intercrop system is to have two seeds of varying size. So you need to have something that's smaller seeded, that along with something that is fairly large in size. That way then you can use kind of a sieve type system to separate them once you've harvested the crop.
One of the third keys to intercropping is weed management. Now, when you mix a grass and a broadleaf together, you really have no options for weed control. However, when you mix two broadleaf crops together, there are some possibilities for weed control within the system. Clethodim can be applied for grass control when you have two broadleaf crops together. There are some options for broadleaf control, and that would be using imazamox. However, using imazamox, you have to have a clear field, two crops that are tolerant. One example would be a clear field canola grown with peas. Recently, Beyond Extra was registered and is labeled for use on both clearfield crops as well as non-clearfield crops. Previously, Raptor was allowed for non-clearfield crops but could not be applied to clearfield crops, while Beyond was registered for clearfield crops but not for non-clearfield crops. So with the registration of Beyond Extra, you are actually within label parameters now to apply in an intercropping scenario. Weed management in season is important for intercropping, but I believe that pre-emergent application and weed control is more important in an intercropping scenario. If you can get a good burn down and a good pre-emergent herbicide action, I believe you have a better chance of having a cleaner field going forward. However, it is important to make sure that the pre-emergent herbicide you are using is registered for both crops in your intercrop mix.
When intercropping, it is important to have a strategy in mind when you start. It is important to pick, of the two crops that you are growing together, pick a crop that you want to have more of in the end. If you desire to have more peas, increase your seeding rate of peas while decreasing your rate of your companion or oil or whatever crop you're growing alongside of it. If your desire is to have more oil seed, then you should increase your seeding rate of your oil seed while decreasing the rate of your peas. The other thing to note when picking a winner that might be an oil seed is you might need to add some fertilizer in the equation. Canola and mustard do require some fertility in order to reach optimal yields. So if you're trying to maximize your canola or your mustard yield, it's best to have some form of fertilizer within the system. If you are attempting to maximize your pulse crop, it's not as important to have fertilizer within the system, as they fix their own nitrogen, and actually adding nitrogen may unintentionally harm the pulse crops.
Thank you for listening to our story about intercropping, and for listening to some of the strategies and experiences we have found that work on our farm. If you have any questions, please reach out to us and ask away. We are always willing to share with what we have seen personally. Make sure to like and subscribe and follow along for more of our farming journey. Have a great day.